Hey YouTube, welcome back. Today we're talking about risk registers. A risk register is another fairly simple but essential tool. Make no mistake here, risk management is one of the main reasons that project managers get paid. Like most things, you can engineer this tool to do anything. Perhaps we may use the risk register to update issue logs, lessons learned logs, or action trackers. We can even use the risk register to feed updates into the project schedule. That said, don't forget that good old US naval principle, keep it simple, stupid. Now, the areas that we might want to capture could include a risk reference. This is useful for referring to it with other parties, the project phase, the actual risk, what if. Now, this is a useful way of evaluating the risks. So, what if the server room isn't built in time? What if the server arrives damaged, etc. We also want to record the impact, the probability, the severity, a mitigation for that risk, who the owner of the risk is, any updates relating to that risk, and status, such as open, closed, on hold, due, or something else. Now, for those of you that work on multiple projects or programs or projects with very large and complex information flows, you might also want a way of recording the project, the customer, the project stream, etc. A risk register might look something like this. Now, I suggested that one of the areas you might want to capture when fleshing out your risk register is the what if area. This is a very useful way of identifying your risk, and on that point, it might be a good idea to just flag up a big difference here between a risk and an issue. A risk is something that might happen, and if it happens, there will be some impact to your project, whereas an issue is something that has happened and has had some impact on your project. Using the what if approach is a useful way of looking at your risks. You pose questions like this: what if something happens? What would be the impact and to what extent? This is not quite the same as a what if scenario analysis or WISA, as that is more of a scheduling tool, although the question can be used in the same way. So what can you use to record and manage risks? The structure of a number of the tools I talk about, such as a risk register, the issue log, the action tracker, and the assumptions register, are all quite similar. Some of this might seem like duplication, but they all play an important role within project management. If you have SharePoint or Microsoft Teams, and most companies do, then they provide a great shared working space. You can use this for a number of project documents. In fact, I would suggest that if you do have a SharePoint license, then you create a site for each project and build out these in project-specific sites. SharePoint makes it easy to back up, audit, roll back, track changes, build workflows, issue notifications when something changes, and control access to that data. Microsoft Access is another tool. There are some nice things. I've seen several companies use Microsoft Access for their project documentation. Personally, I don't like it. It's a little bit complex to set up, though in most cases, the company has created something in the past and has just templated that and continued to use it. Oracle Apex is a fantastic system if you have Oracle in your organization. You can use Apex to build a web front end. It's very simple, doesn't have too many bangs and whistles, but it does allow you to build a very usable interface that can suit your project requirements and keeps your data nice and secure. Now, the tool I use most often is Microsoft Excel or a other spreadsheet. You can engineer the spreadsheet to meet every requirement that your project has with ease, and it has a great learning curve, allowing you to record the bare minimum as you start out, and then as your project grows or your knowledge grows, you can add more features to the risk register. Of course, any other app you have access to, such as a CRM or an ERP or service management tools or EDMS, etc., these can all be used as well. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I would normally use Microsoft Excel, and I would definitely recommend it. The things that we might want to capture in our risk register are things like the risk reference and the project phase. The risk reference should be a unique reference in my document. This allows me to link it to other documents within the project documentation. I can do this through automation or manually. And an example of how I might use this information might be in my action tracker, where I refer to a specific risk and any actions I am expected to work on as part of that risk management. Now, the project phase details the area that I might expect to encounter the risk. We obviously need to have some way of saying what risk we identified. A risk could be repeated multiple times with different unique references, and that's also acceptable. What if is our first chance to define the scenario that poses a risk to our project. Mitigation is really quite an important part of risk management. This is how we might avoid the risk. Now, we need to understand that you cannot avoid all risk. In many cases, you simply need to define how you will reduce the impact of the risk to your project. Impact, probability, severity, and risk score. Now, in my case, I use conditional formatting within my spreadsheets. For impact, probability, and severity, the cell color will be based on the keyword of high, low, medium, unknown. The colors don't really matter, they just give you a visual overview of your risks. The risk score is also conditionally formatted in my spreadsheets. I use a formula that is based on the following scores. Unknown, and therefore potentially the biggest risk, is 30. High risk is 25, medium risk is 15, and the low risk is 10. These numbers don't really matter to your project. They're just a way for me to visually color my cells or the text in my cells so that when I show this data to someone else, they can say, oh, why is that red? Why is that yellow? Why is that green? And I can quickly explain that to someone. The color helps me spot the big ones, and it helps anyone else that has access to my documentation spot the big ones and allows them another way of understanding which areas they may want to know more about my project. Now, the owner of the risk is a person in my project team that will be responsible for this risk. Now, this is not about finding someone to blame. It is about finding someone to manage the risk. In many cases, the risk manager is the project manager. In other words, it's usually me. But the risk manager could also be the head of a network team, for example. I use the updates column to track updates. This is usually different from the action tracker. The status gives me a visual overview of which risks are open, closed, or on hold. A closed risk could mean that the risk came to nothing, it could mean that the risk became an issue, or it could mean that your mitigation steps have avoided the risk completely. Okay, YouTube, that's my overview of the risk register. If you do have any questions on this topic, please feel free to use the comments below, reach out to me, and I will be happy to help you.